My name is Ashley Farmer, and I'm co-director of Learning and Engagement at the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. Welcome to this evening's program, a Mexican art and history lesson, Art Printmaking Collective, presented in partnership with Artes de México in Utah. I'm excited for this evening's fascinating conversation, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's presenters. Before that, I would like to acknowledge that the UMFA is situated on land which is named for the Ute tribe and is the unceded traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah and the UMFA acknowledge the significance of place and the continued existence and contributions of Indigenous people who have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm that the U of U and UMFA's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach initiatives. I would also like to share some guideposts for our evening. Here at the UMFA, we appreciate that each person brings their personal experience to their understanding of art and culture and acknowledge that there are multiple perspectives. As such, we aim to create a loving, brave space that doesn't tolerate hatred, racism, sexism, ableism. And in short, we encourage respectful dialogue and appreciate a diversity of voices and perspectives. I also want to mention that our presenters this evening will answer questions at the end. So if you have some questions that occur to you along the way, please put them in the chat and we'll be able to address them at the end. So feel free to do that as we go. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to tonight's presenters. First is Susan Vogel. Susan Vogel is a freelance writer and journalist. In 1990, she received a grant from Utah Humanities to research her book, Becoming Pablo O'Higgins. She holds a BA in English from San Francisco State University and a JD from Hastings College of Law. In 1977, she studied at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma, excuse my pronunciation, de Mexico in Mexico City. Her writing has appeared in local, national, and international publications, including Voices of Mexico. After Susan, we have Antonio Pazarán. Born and raised in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago to Mexican immigrant parents, Pazarán grew up alongside two sisters and an older brother. He is a self-taught painter, muralist, and printmaker, and was also formally trained at Columbia College Chicago, earning a BA in graphic design and holding a master's in arts and teaching from the Art Institute of Chicago. Pazarán is a founding member of the print collective Instituto Gráfico de Chicago that promotes and advances the legacy and vitality of printmaking by fostering collaboration and solidarity amongst print artists through transnational dialogue and art making. They also create programming outside of formal education settings that celebrate and demystify printmaking techniques and processes for the public. Pazarán was honored in 2020 as the Museum Art Educator of the Year by the Illinois Art Education Association. Pazarán finds inspiration in everyday life situations and strives to incorporate this central to his culture and environment. Finally, we have Ali Pai. Ali Pai was born and lives in the city of Oaxaca. She has earned her academic studies as a specialist in educational policy and management by Flaxo, Mexico. She has a master's in education in the field of teacher training. She has a master's also in museum studies, a degree in education sciences. She's an instructor in plastic arts with a specialty in engraving. And then she also, directs her traditional graphic workshop, Taller Cantera, located in Santa Lucia del Camino. She has participated in various exhibitions at the local, state, and national Mexican level. And her artistic theme revolves around female humanism and symbolisms in the construction of quote unquote being a woman. She promotes multidisciplinary projects combining art, education, and research. We're so happy to have these three panelists here this evening. And now it's my pleasure to turn things over to our moderator for this evening, Fanny Blauer, Director of Artes de México in Utah. And to introduce you to Fanny. Fanny Guadalupe Blauer is a native of Mexico and graduate of the Instituto Politécnico Nacional. Fanny has worked as an accountant in Mexico in the US. She is the executive director for Artes de México in Utah and a passionate presenter of cultural workshops. She also works as a translator and interpreter for the Natural History Museum of Utah. And Fanny recently earned an Anthropology of Art diploma from the Center for Research and Advanced Studies of Social Anthropology. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you so much, Fanny. I'm happy to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for the space, the opportunity, and for the inclusion to let us be part of this initiative of the museum being more diverse and inclusive as we incorporate community conversations with community members to learn the perspectives of our community. We're very proud of these perspectives that enrich our history and our culture and bring us together. And this group is particularly amazing to me because in the journey of finding these amazing speakers that are with us today, I have learned so much from them, but most of all is their passion and how a historical venue, a historical element in our history is so relevant still now. And with that, I would like to give the voice now to Susan Vogel.
Thank you so much, Fanny and Ashley. So it's a really great honor to be here tonight to be able to talk about the world famous Taller de Gráfico Popular, which I'm going to call the Taller, meaning workshop, and about printmaking, the next great chapter of Mexican art following the mural movement. Let's look at the next slide, please. Oh, wait, this one. Here we go. Let's stay here for a second. So why following the mural movement? Because the mural projects began in 1922 at the end of the Mexican Revolution, were dependent on the Mexican government providing walls. This changed when a conservative president, Plutarco Calles, took office and cracked down on the artists and the liberal values in the murals. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is when many muralists came to the US to teach and to work. Pablo got a scholarship to study in the Soviet Union. So I'm talking about Pablo O'Higgins, who was a Utah-born artist who ended up being a really famous and still very well-known artist in Mexico. So let's go to the next slide. So when Liberal President Lázaro Cárdenas, who you can see at the right, took office in 1934, he reinvigorated the promises of the revolution, welcoming artists back from the US and everywhere, giving them mural commissions. He also supported a government project for graphic arts, the League of Revolutionary Artists and Writers, LEAR, which had the goal of creating art to fight the rise of fascism in Europe and in Mexico and addressing other social issues. So Pablo O'Higgins here and Leopoldo Méndez were among the founders of the Taller. The LEAR became too close to the government, so Pablo and Leopoldo decided to start a new independent graphic arts collective. Along with Luis Arenal, another artist, they formed the Taller de Gráfico Popular. Fellow artist Mariana Lampolsky called Pablo O'Higgins and Leopoldo Méndez café con leche, meaning coffee with milk. They were also described as the soul of God and the devil. Pablo was the soul of God. Let's go on to the next slide. So Pablo did not like cutting into linoleum or wood blocks. What he preferred to do was lithography. And this is an example of an artist in Cuba who is drawing with a wax crayon on a lithography stone. I walked into this big graphic arts workshop in Havana just before the pandemic. I mentioned Pablo O'Higgins and everybody knew who he was. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, there's a little video. Okay, so the Taller de Gráfico Popular, this image tells you a lot about what they did. So their medium was printmaking rather than murals, because prints are cheap to create, and unlike murals, they're transportable. The art they created was art for the people, like these workers, not for critics and not for art galleries. If the taller artists wanted input, they asked a janitor, not an academic. More women were involved in printmaking than in the mural projects. They used easy to understand images rather than words, because not everybody would be able to read Spanish. And they used social realism, nothing abstract. They wanted the images very easy to understand. They created their work through the collaborative process, often not signing their work and not numbering their prints. Finally, the artists considered themselves workers, and they often downplayed any academic training or privilege that they had. The taller created more than 10,000 works in their first 25 years, and it's been called the single most significant graphic arts workshop in the Americas. Let's go to the next slide. So they founded the taller in 1937 when refugees from the Spanish Civil War were flooding into Mexico, bringing firsthand accounts of the horrors of fascism in Europe. The taller hit the ground running. These are examples of the types of prints that they made and some of the earliest works of Pablo. The prints included volantes or flyers, and those are shown at the right, where Pablo's work is teaching the campesinos what a fair price is for the corn that they produce. They also created carteles or posters like the one at the top with Pablo's image of a man chained to a swastika. And these were plastered on walls. They also created portfolios like the one at the bottom left. This is the Black Book of Nazi Terror with images and texts. When these are created for an international audience, they're often bilingual in Spanish and in English. Let's go on to the next image. So I know you're asking, how did this young man, this artist from Utah, become a part of the Arte Gráfico Popular, indeed a co-founder? And how did he get his picture into a mural by Diego Rivera? He's the blonde guy in this May Day mural, this famous mural by Diego Rivera. Let's go on to the next one. So my book, Becoming Pablo O'Higgins, goes into a whole lot of detail about his family life. And if you read it, you'll find out why I have an image of Joe Hill here, the labor martyr. But to summarize, Pablo grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. He spent several years in the San Diego area. His family had a ranch in El Cajon, near the border of Mexico. And this is where he fell in love with Mexico and with Mexican workers and their children, probably workers that his family employed on the ranch. In Salt Lake City, he grew up at the center of the mining industry. His father was a lawyer for mining companies and also a judge. He went to public schools, including East High, and there the art training was, as you see in this picture, sitting in a classroom copying from classic statues. Interestingly, his senior year at East, he only took art in Spanish. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So Pablo had the benefit at East High, his last year of school there, of studying under LeConte Stewart, one of our most famous regionalist painters. And LeConte Stewart took his students outside of the classroom and had them paint in plein air. So from LeConte Stewart, Pablo learned to depict workers in their environments, like you can see with LeConte's picture of the train, the workers with the train, and to show their humanity and to show the dignity of workers' work and their lives. After graduation from East, Pablo enrolled in an art school in San Diego, and he went back to copying the boring statues in the art classrooms. But his mother sends him an article from an art magazine about how Diego Rivera has just returned from Paris to Mexico to be part of these mural projects, and how Rivera has turned his back on his classical training. Pablo writes a letter to Rivera. Rivera writes back inviting him to come to Mexico and see what's going on. So let's have the next slide, please. Pablo arrives in Mexico City in 1924 and begins watching Rivera paint every day at the Ministry of Education. After about 6 months, Rivera's like, get down here, kid, get to work. And Pablo starts grinding Rivera's paint and eventually painting the words on these ribbons at the top of these images that you see. These ribbons teach people about the accomplishments of the revolution, including that the land and its minerals belong to the people, not to foreign corporations. Pablo becomes an assistant to Rivera and works with him on his murals until 1929. Let's go to the next slide. So in 1929, Pablo also becomes steeped in the work of late printmaker Jose Guadalupe Posada, who has died in obscurity 16 years earlier. Posada, as you know, made the symbol of the calavera, a symbol of death and rebirth in Mexico. He turned it into a popular symbol to mock the pretentiousness of the upper classes. So Pablo helped Jean Charlot, another muralist, catalog the work of Posada, resulting in a publication of a monograph on Posada's work in 1930. Let's go on to the next one. This is just for fun. These are Posada's actual etchings that he made his prints from in a private collection in San Francisco. And San Francisco artist Isaac Vasquez and I were able to see these. Sadly, we were not able to buy them. They were out of our price range, but they were for sale. Let's go to the next slide. This is, shows the influence of Posada on Pablo. It's a 1940 print by him of an academic or a recent graduate dancing with an upper class woman and trampling on the rights of workers. I wonder if this is Pablo's depiction of his own turning back, his back on education. He only studied for a few weeks in art school after high school. Let's go on to the next image. And this is another wonderful calavera that shows Pablo's influence because it's by Bay Area artist Byron Randall, who was Pablo's best friend in the US and who worked at the Taller in Mexico. So Byron Randall turns Posada's Don Quixote, who is with a spear battling windmills. He turns it into an artist with his weapon, which is a paintbrush, fighting a big old capitalist. Let's go on to the next one. So during the war years, the US, Mexico, and the Soviet Union were allies in fighting the war against fascism. Pablo had lived in all three countries, and in essence, he was tricultural. And he used his passport and all of these advantages to essentially become a cultural ambassador between the US and Mexico. He taught taller-style printmaking in the US, and he brought US artists to Mexico to study there, including on the GI Bill after the war. In Mexico City, Pablo's rooftop apartment and studio became a first stop for US artists coming to study at the Taller. And Byron Randall here sketched Pablo's famous Taller studio and his famous coffee pot. At the end of the war, more than half of the Taller artists were guest artists from outside the US. So thanks to all of this interaction between the US and Mexico, much promoted by Pablo, other tailleurs were established in New York, Portland, and Los Angeles. Byron, the creator of this sprint here, started the workshop in San Francisco. Sometimes, however, Pablo's US passport caused problems. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So this is a very unusual work by Pablo. It's a rare example of a worker just floating in space. We don't know where this worker is. We don't even know if he's a worker. He looks like he could be a campesino with his clothes of manta or soft cotton, or he could be a Spanish soldier with his helmet and his beard, or he could be both. So Pablo created this lithograph in 1942 when he had had a mural commission revoked because he was not a Mexican citizen. This was very, very difficult for him. He thought he was Mexicano. He was treated as a Mexican artist, but he would keep his US passport for almost another 20 years. There was no dual citizenship during his life. Let's go on to the next image. People have asked about the effect of Pablo's reach and his influence in the US. And I just want to say that at war's end in 1945, this awkward alliance between the US and Soviet Union ended, and the Cold War began and McCarthyism began. So this really did limit a lot of what the workers did or the artists did with their knowledge of the Taller's work. Mexico's conservative government collaborated with the US to harass and even deport US artists living in Mexico. And those who had worked with the Taller were especially vulnerable. Pablo O'Higgins landed on their list. Elizabeth Catlett was treated horribly. Even people who just studied with the Taller were subject to persecution. Bay Area artist Frank Rowe had studied with the Taller in Mexico City. He learned not to discuss his work in the US. Rowe had worked with a taller in 1946. In 1950, he was fired from his job as a professor at San Francisco State University when he refused to sign a loyalty oath. When I was a student at San Francisco State in the late 70s, sitting in a class taught by Angela Davis, Frank Rowe was still fighting for his job, to get his job back at San Francisco State. Took him 30 years. He did not get it back until 1980, the year I graduated. So Frank Rowe was one of the few bold artists willing to take on the Cold War. Many artists turned to landscape art or to abstract art to avoid the problems of doing political art. The taller itself in Mexico was criticized for resorting to recycling images of the revolution. During the most intense times of McCarthyism, Pablo got a mural commission to paint a mural in Hawaii at the Longshoremen's Union. He was being watched by the US government, but he flew under the radar to Hawaii, which was still a territory, not a state, and he painted the mural. Hawaii had planned an exhibit of his art, but it was canceled due to Cold War tensions. When Pablo was going back to Mexico from Hawaii, an envelope was on its way to Hawaii. It arrived in the Longshoremen's Union in 1953. It sat in a drawer until 1990 when I opened it. Let's go to the next slide. This is a lithograph by Pablo's best friend and taller member, Leopoldo Mendez, that slams the McCarthy era. It's criticizing the persecution of Jack Hall, the head of the Longshoremen's Union in Hawaii. So Mendez created this as a favor to Pablo. Pablo never saw it, sat in a drawer. Let's look at Pablo's Hawaii mural, the next slide. To me, this is Pablo's masterpiece. The union wanted a mural to celebrate how workers of all races and ethnicities in Hawaii came together during the war to fight fascism. And here we have workers that are marching towards the light, which is literally the skylight in a 3-story staircase that he painted at union headquarters, showing that the union promised them dignity and brings them equal rights. The work shows the style that he became known for, with loose swooping lines that he used in his landscapes and workers that become intertwined with the landscapes, much like the image you've seen behind me, where he depicts a woman who wears a maguey, the symbol of Mexico, as a crown, and she's Madre Tierra, she's Mother Earth. So I want to end with some images by Pablo. The next slide, please. That show Pablo's love of Mexico, love of the worker. I see these and I think, oh, these aren't political. But what is more political in our capitalist world than shining the light on the worker, including the invisible workers, like those working in mines, selling things on the street, sleeping on the streets after working, or like the ones on the bottom right, waiting to see if they get a job. These are longshoremen waiting to see if they get work. But we have the same workers in front of the Home Depot here in Salt Lake, waiting every day to see if they're lucky enough to get work, and at the end of the workday to see if they're lucky enough to get paid. So I want to end with that, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak of Pablo O'Higgins and his role with the Arte Gráfico Popular. And I hope this inspires artists to take up their weapons to fight for social justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan. So inspiring. And I feel like this deserves a whole 2 hours of conversation or more, right? During our practices of this presentation, it's amazing to see how art is this weapon. I don't like to use the word weapon because it's very politicized, but it's more of the tool, it's more of the art element to fight for social justice. And I love that image of Byron Randall, as you mentioned, and instead of the spear is the paintbrush. Mm-hmm. And I will pass now that to Antonio, because Antonio is the perfect example of how all this history makes sense now. Thank you, Antonio.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having the Instituto Gráfico de Chicago being part of this event tonight. My name is Antonio Pazarán. I'm one of the founding members of the Instituto Gráfico here in Chicago. Can we go to the next slide, please? And as I talk and say that I'm one of the founding members, I also want to acknowledge Carlos Barberena, Chema Scando, Eric J. Garcia, Eric Gasca, Jose Luis Gutierrez, Ricardo X. Herman, another one of the founding members, Salvador Jimenez Flores, and Vanessa Sanchez. And I say their names because they are very present with me all the time, and we're always working and collaborating in the work that we do through IGC here in Chicago. So I'll probably be, instead of saying the whole name of our instituto, I will probably be just referring it to from now on as IGC. Can we go to the next slide? These are my brother in arms and sister in arms when it comes to the work that we do, when it comes to creating and collaborating and making prints and maintaining the essence of Latin American art. And one of the reasons why the Instituto Gráfico was created was for that same reason, that we were not being invited or even taken into account when it came to other organizations putting together print fairs or printmaking projects that were inspired by the Taller de Gráfica Popular, Posada, and other Latin American and Mexican printmakers. Yet we did not see the artists that were being invited reflected on the wall as what was being inspired. So instead of us staying in line and waiting for that opportunity, we just took it upon ourselves to create our own instituto, and we started just creating and printmaking. And I think we began with a list of 32 corridos, which are these like songs that talk about revolution, in order to begin working. And we just started carving and inking plates and creating prints. We go to the next slide. And the reason why I say this is because one of the first conversations that we had as a group was how is it that we wanted to do this work, and who do we want to use as an exemplar. And there was no other group of artists that we looked upon as the Taller de Gráfico Popular, and their mission to work and to help other organizations by creating graphics that would be able to help union workers and just events that were happening in Mexico at that time. The counterpart here in Chicago, we saw it as the same, that we could use that type of idea to create our work and also our mission for what is it that we wanted to do. We definitely have social justice and a social consciousness when it comes to the work that we create. And as Susan was talking about, how is it that printmaking can be a way of like educating, but also a way of like bringing these people to the forefront of what is it that's happening, especially the worker. We look at printmaking as a method or as a form of resistance against these backward thinking that is happening in our communities. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the first print portfolio we put together, it kind of fell upon the 100-year anniversary of El Maestro Jose Guadalupe Posada and his death. So we decided to come up with a print portfolio called Posada Presente. And the main idea behind this was, if Posada was living today, what would he be printing to? And I'm very happy to say that our fellow printmaking artists, friends, did not disappoint in the work that they sent in for this portfolio. Can we go to the next slide, please? And just like was being said in the first part of the presentation, Posada is very much present in this work. La Catrina, or La Garbancera, as it's formerly known, is very present as well. And we were able to collaborate with artists from Chicago, Texas, California, Oaxaca, Mexico City, and Nicaragua as well. So we've been able to use social media in a very positive manner, where we're able to connect with artists, and we propose what we're trying to do and create, and they participate with us. Can we go to the next slide? We have artists like Daniela Mora, who's located in Baja California Sur, and his print called Gordo Político, excuse me. And then on the other side, we have Rene Arceo, who is a very well-known printmaker here in the city of Chicago. And he is one of our, also one of our mentors here in the city. And we always rely on him when we have questions. And he's been very well in tune to work with us and guide us in some of the projects that we do. And this is his print called Posada Spirits. We go to the next slide. And here we have Carlos Barberena, Nicaraguan printmaker, who's also here in Chicago, and his print Light My Fire, which is also kind of like touching upon some of the work that Posada was doing with his Catrina. And then we also have a print from Oaxaca, from Edith Chavez, called Spina De La Revolucion, which is making social commentary to the Mexican Revolution, and also to how we use these figures now also to sell and create this like commercial kind of life, and kind of taken away what the ideals of Zapata was, but now we're actually using them even for commercialization and what's happening in Mexico. We go to the next slide, please. Here we have a print by Carlos Bautista, another Oaxacan artist, and his La Muerte es Muerte, which is once again remembering Jose Guadalupe Posada and his love for las calaveras that were bringing like social awareness to people. And we also have the work from Carlamagno Pedro Martinez, who is an artist that's very well known for his pottery when it comes to black clay, but also a printmaker. And here he captures Los Fantasmas de Posada y su Hijo, where he depicts one of the very few images that exist of Posada. And I believe he used a picture where Posada is standing with his son at a very young age. I think he was 14 or 15. And he created this beautiful print on wood. We go to the next print. One of my favorite prints from this portfolio is from El Maestro Juan Fuentes. And the name of the print is called Posada y Yo, where he's kind of going back and looking at the print that Leopoldo Mendez did, where Posada is sitting at his studio, looking out the window and seeing how the police and the government are treating the worker. Yet we fast forward a couple of years to our present day, and we still continue to see the worker being abused and still having to fight for their rights and fair wages in life, as unfortunately we still see happening. And I think Maestro Fuentes captures that very well. And this is one of my favorite prints, and I'm very happy and lucky to have one of these in my collection. We go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we do with these portfolios is not only do we able to connect and work with other artists from across the country and also crossing some borders, but what we're able to do is we're able to create a good amount of work where we're able to have 1 to 2 portfolios extra, where we keep one for our collection. We use one for distributing and showing in galleries. And then we have an extra one that we usually sell. When we are able to sell that portfolio, we're able to make some money. And what we do with it is we buy more paper and we use it for shipping and handling, because that's where our cost usually goes. And we create a new portfolio experience, and we invite another 32 artists. We propose an idea. This one was called Dichos y Diretes, which are old sayings. And we also gave the artists the opportunity to use double entendres to create their prints. And we go to the next slide. And once again, they did not disappoint with the work that they were doing, as some of these artists like Jose Sanchez Santamaria from Morelos created a print that's one of my favorites, because it's kind of funny because of the Chile de Dulce y de Manteca is the title of that work, which is a play on words in Mexico. The one on the other side, very colorful, is from Ricardo Serment. He's one of the founding members of the Instituto of IGC. And he was very much in tune with what was going on during that time. And he wanted to make a print that would celebrate all the dreamers and a lot of the students that are still going through some of these these problems of knowing whether they're going to be able to stay here and continue their education. He is an actual a teacher in an elementary school, so he's very connected with students, and he wants to celebrate them as well. And then we have Daniela Mora once again at the bottom. Oh no, that one right now. We could move over one more and we could go to the next slide. Here we go. Here we have artists like Sean Star Wars, who is a Missouri printmaker, and he participated with us. He was very excited to work with us in the print portfolio. And Sean Star Wars sends us his print called Skulls Are Forever. Then in the middle, we have a print by El Pinche Grabador, which is his actual name. He's from Guanajuato, Mexico, in the city of Guanajuato. And he used the Pablo Neruda saying to create this print, En un beso sabrás todo lo que he callado, which is one of my favorite prints as well. And then once again, we have Carlos Bautista, where he celebrates nature, he celebrates women, and he celebrates life through a print. And he's also talking about environmentalism in a lot of the work that he creates, which kind of depicts a little bit of what Susan was talking about in the print behind her, where you have the woman with the maguey plant on her head. But here we have a different depiction of it, but still kind of talking about that connection between humans and nature. We go to the next print. Here we have another member of the Instituto, which is Carlos Barberena. And his saying is, En la tierra de los ciegos, el tuerto es el rey. In the land of the blind, the person with one eye will be the king. One of my favorite, and you're probably gonna hear me say that a lot because I do love printmaking, so I just continue to say that. Eric J. Garcia, who is a New Mexico artist, lived in Chicago, and I think now he's back in New Mexico. He's a political cartoonist, and he always uses the fat cat as one of the depictions in his work. But I love the print that he's doing here. don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining, which is a great way of like talking about some of the things that the government will usually tell us, and kind of muddy the water, so we kind of like agree with what they're saying. And then on the other side, we have an artist from San Luis Potosí. His name is J Garcia, and a lot of the work that he does is also very in tune with the times that we're living in today, and using the devil as one of the oldest sayings in Mexico: "Más sabe el diablo por viejo que por diablo." We could go to the next slide, please. The last portfolio that we were able to put together was called Contra. Once again, we were able to sell one of these portfolios, and we were able to make more money and send paper out to a lot of these artists. We go to the next slide. And the depictions, once again, it was Contra, going against the political party that was in power. And instead of highlighting a certain individual, we wanted to highlight the backwards thinking of it. We wanted to talk about border issues, whether we're talking about the border on the southern part of Mexico, between our brothers and more in Latin America, or even some of the things that are happening in the United States, with René Arceo depicting the Statue of Liberty, homelessness, and also a lot of the contributions we do here in this country. We go to the next slide, please. Here we have Paulina Camacho, who is an educator, works at a local high school, and right now she's actually seeking her PhD, but also bringing up some of the issues that sometimes a lot of people don't want to talk about. And I think it's important that we have a lot of these issues going on, and we make sure that graphics is the best way to kind of transmit these ideas, as we're able to create many, and it becomes a very democratic form of distributing work. Joel Rendon, a very well-established printmaker in Mexico, who actually has a TV show called Estampa al Minuto. He's also from la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. And he also created this depiction of, like, once again, bringing the devil, and his, I guess, his knowledge for being older, not just for being the devil, but just for being an older individual. We go to the next slide, please. Here we have Oscar Moya, Chicago artist, but now in Texas. And once again, this is an artist that usually talks about a lot of border issues, bringing aware to things that are happening between Mexico and the U.S. and immigrants, and just issues that are important to us. We go to the next slide. And one of my favorites, Esther Hernandez. She's a very well-known Chicana printmaker. And here she participated with us. And we've been lucky that she's participated with us in all our portfolios. She's very much in tune with a lot of the things that we're doing. And I'm very honored to not only have know her, but also to have participated with her in various portfolios. And just the Resist and Statue of Liberty kind of just talks about some of the issues that were going on. And then that little tattoo on her hand talking about nasty, of how women were being depicted as being these nasty individuals, right? We go to the next slide. And some of the things that the Instituto does is that we create a lot of portfolios. We celebrate artists, and we go to the next slide. And we celebrate Carlos Cortez, who was another printmaker here in Chicago that unfortunately passed away. But he was a very much influence on a lot of the artists, because he also brought upon us the importance to talk about workers, to talk about our community, and talk about the issues that are happening. And the artists that participated, once again, did not disappoint. We go to the next slide. As a lot of the artists depicted Carlos Cortez, but also kind of brought back his style of like always having the worker in our main focus. We go to the next slide. Carlos Barberena, and here we have, I believe it's Oscar Moya again participating with us. We go to the next slide. And Grabadolandia perhaps is one of my favorite things that we do here in the Instituto, where we create a printmaking festival that's free for the artists to participate, but most importantly, it's free for the people that come in and look at the work that's being shown. And we also tell the artists that not only do we want you guys to activate your table by having an educational component, so people can leave with some sort of knowledge behind them, but also make sure that they're bringing artwork that's very affordable, because a lot of the people that come to this festival are working class. And unfortunately, sometimes art is not at the forefront of what is it that we want to purchase, because we have other things in mind, right? Rent, food, and clothing. We go to the next slide. And we've been able to do this printmaking festival with the support of the National Museum of Mexican Art here in Chicago. They've been very gracious with us, as they allow us to have a free space to put this event together. And the last time we had an event, I believe we had over 2,000 people in one weekend. We go to the next slide and just kind of showcase some of the flyers that we create and posters. And we've also been lucky that other printmakers that come in and they participate, they see that we're just starting off and we don't have equipment. They've given us print presses and they've given us materials to continue the work that we're doing in our community. We go to the next slide. And here's just some images of how is it that we take over the museum and we create this huge printmaking fair for everybody to come in. And either we make them print and we make them participate, we make them turn the wheel on the press in order for them to be part of the festival in one way or another. We go to the next to the next slide. Unfortunately, last year, because of the pandemic, we had to go virtual. This year, we're going to go virtual again because in our communities here in Chicago, the communities of color, specifically Latinx communities, have been the hardest hit because our people work in hospitals, restaurants, and they're the ones that are not able to work from home. So they've been out there working and maintaining the city moving along. Because of that, we're going to make our festival once again in a virtual space. And we already have a good amount of artists that are going to be participating with us with videos and with live sessions in their studio and just talking printmaking and discussing the importance of print. We go to the next slide. Some of our partnerships, festivals, we continue to do this, even though we're still maintaining distance and trying to keep everybody safe. We go to the next slide. We've been able to work with the College of DuPage. They had our Frida exhibit. It just finished, I believe, like a week ago. So we were able to activate their courtyard by having printmaking in a very open market manner. And we had people come in and do prints based on Frida Kahlo. Northwestern University, their Black Museum, we were able to activate their school as well. We go to the next slide. And I think this is the biggest one we've done so far, where we work with the Gobierno de la Ciudad de Mexico, and where we did, I think it was like a 2-week program where we worked together with printmakers from Mexico City, and we put together some printmaking activities. We would present from Chicago all the way to Mexico, and we were able to create a very nice virtual classroom where we would give students the materials that they would need. And we kept in mind that in Mexico, there's also a big problem with COVID and people are maintaining distance. So we were able to use materials that are household items in order to create and maintain and make some really good prints. So we did prints with aluminum foil that almost looked like lithographs using water soluble markers. We used cardboard to make collagraphs that almost looked like etchings. And we were able to also create our own very linoleum blocks by using various materials with what do you call it? With like these plastic moldings that we're able to build, and people were able to carve them and print and do these really fantastic prints. And that's the Instituto Gráfico de Chicago. We celebrate Latin American art. Latin printmaking. Sorry, that was my dog. My apologies. And we're going to continue to create printmaking and hopefully maintain these relationships with other artists. And if we continue to do everything remote, we're going to still be able to mail things and get some prints done. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your patience with me as well. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Muchas gracias. It is like if we were rewinding and fast forwarding history, right? We see this relevance and we see these images as if they were made by Jose Guadalupe Posadas or Leopoldo Mendes or others, and they are made by our community, for our community, and showing the meaning of how we interpret our history and our present. I am very happy to see that this is a type of art that shows a democratic form of understanding our behaviors as a society. And then with that perspective of yours and Susan, then we move forward to the perspective of women. What is the role of women in all this printing collective? And then we have here Alejandra Munoz Alepai to tell us about that. I wanna let you know that her presentation was pre-recorded. We had translated her presentation from Spanish to English. So bear with us for the recording sound. And Ali, if you have just a few seconds to say something.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Saludos desde Oaxaca. Mi nombre es Ale Pai, mi nombre de crew. Trabajo lo que es la gráfica y pues los saludo desde aquí del Taller Cantera, un espacio que he conformado y que pues a continuación van a ver con con un movimiento de diferentes mujeres oaxaqueñas también que estamos empezando a conformar nuestros propios espacios de la gráfica. Obviamente que con la herencia de los grandes maestros, como lo mencionaron los anteriores ponentes, el maestro Leopoldo Méndez, ¿no? El taller de gráfica popular, el maestro también O'Higgins, ¿no? Y también las maestras, grandes maestras que también han existido y siguen presentes entre nosotros.
Muchas gracias, Ali. Let's start with Ali's presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. My name is Ale Pai. I am a woman who was born and resides in Oaxaca, Mexico. I hope some of you have visited Oaxaca. I identify myself with the symbol of the spiral snail, as this being the sound element of the female voices and stories. And this is because I am avid to explore our origin as female humans. In Oaxaca, I perform as an engraver and a painter. I am also a teacher of young pre-university students, and I am part of a professional team of the Museum of Oaxacan Painters. Again, I am grateful for the opportunity to share with you today my personal projects and the projects of our collective, which are created independently, integrating the diversity of individualities into collective synergies. Based on our needs as artists and as part of this group, my particular effort has focused on generating multidisciplinary projects in which I wish to integrate the visual arts, pedagogy, museology, and management. In my case, as an engraver, what you see here in the screen, it is my interest to reflect on women, their rights, their identity, their resilience, and the search for the deconstruction of the role and stereotypes of women. I consider very essential to be aware of this perspective and this narrative as a form of expression, since our visual messages entail a responsibility with oneself and with others. And this is from many different aspects, right? From a political, social, and personal transformation commitment. What you see here on the screen is a piece that I created called Woman in the Rain, in which the rain symbolizes the social weight of the faults that are attributed to us and how to be a woman, conditioning ourselves to live always attached to an authority, mostly the male figure, looking down. But however, I consider that in this horizon, it is possible to find ourselves as women who demonstrate our courage to look up at the sky without the guilt of the weight that holds us down. And with that, I would like to explore on some of the history of engraving created in Mexico and especially in the city of Oaxaca, which continues to reflect the artistic legacy inherited from the avant-garde and post-revolutionary graphic communities. This art is deeply related to a political, social, and testimonial character. And as Susan said, it was the Taller de Gráfica Popular, created and directed by artists such as Leopoldo Méndez, Pablo O'Higgins, Luis Arenal, among others, that has left a great legacy to the most important references for the creation of self-managed engraving spaces in the 21st century. And in addition of a great awareness, has been acquired to make visible the historical presence of women artists, such as the teachers who were part of this collective printing workshop movement. What you see here on the screen is three incredible women who developed this art. Fanny Rabel, Elizabeth Catlett, Celia Calderon, and many other artists who until now have been invalidated in the history of Mexican engraving. We're living important times. Here in Oaxaca, the art of engraving. The female figure has had a relevant participation. Our presence in graphics has been growing firmly in the spaces for workshops that are normally directed by male artists. And many women graphic printers, artistic engravers, little by little, we are gaining recognition and visibility. And these help us create awareness and acknowledgement of our identity. Today, we witness a proliferation of engraving workshops, created and directed by women belonging to this new generation, who have directed their professional and artistic lives to graphics, but not only as printers or graphic designers under the shadow of traditional workshops led by men, but we are creators. We are the creators of our own workshops, under our own spaces, and run by ourselves. This is the case of the women that you see here on the screen. We have the workshop called The Graphic Producer of the Forest by Heidi Nukamendi, or the author workshop by Salime Gouraud, or the workshop by Gabriela Morac called Panoply Space, and my own one, who is called Cantera. There is no question that we are assuming this leadership of our creations and spaces, perhaps as a continuity of the legacy and the path traced by the teachers of the popular graphic workshops, as many others who are part of the history of women in art, especially here in Oaxaca. And we believe we are embodying in our creations the voices and combining our efforts in an exhibition project that we have promoted as Oaxacan Women Engraving. The piece of lithography that you see on the screen is called Female Citizens Rewriting History. This, created by me, it's an image that shows in which I intend to show the dignification of women. Dignification begins from the reconstruction of a new genealogy of women engravers, recovering our voice in the narrative of our history, our contributions, and the exercise of authority of women in a new social and educational endeavor, with the purpose of removing ourselves from the beliefs and repressive mentalities that continue to isolate, oppressing, and making us women invisible. The second emphasis of my art and projects I have called Relectura Historica, or re-evaluation of our history in museums, which has been a work of research on historical tracking in the area of museology, utilizing the Museum of Oaxacan Painters, MUPO, which is a museum that you see on the screen from a modern perspective and from an old perspective. This place has been the main source of my project, with the intention to understand this museum in particular as a source of social and cultural context sourced by women. This has been the most important finding in this research work that concentrated on identifying the history of our Oaxacan museum and how this has been linked to the history of Oaxacan women based on their education since colonial times, independence, and the Mexican Revolution. So I would like to share with you some essential research that has been already published in some articles. So the building that you see on the screen gives home today to the Museum of Oaxacan Painters and was built around the 17th century, 1686, during the Viceroy era of what it was called the New Spain. Its construction had the purpose of housing the first only girls' school called School of the Ladies of Our Lady of the Presentation. What makes this study even more interesting is that the school was found with the intention to provide education and home to orphan girls. But not any orphan girls. Most of those girls were known as the mestizo daughters not recognized among Spaniards for being partially indigenous. So those girls participated in all the religious festivities because the dominant teaching model was the colonial ecclesiastical training mestizo and indigenous girls for more than 100 years until the 19th century. Next time you come to Oaxaca, make sure you come to this building, which is a beautiful establishment. The history has been fascinating. The Academy of Girls remained for 24 years until 1890, which is the year that transformed this college into the College of Education for Teachers in Oaxaca, what we call in Mexico Escuela Normal. This became a historical reference on the inclusion of Oaxacan women in professional education. And some of the women who fought for the legitimacy and force for this type of education were Francisca Peña, Ana María Rodríguez, Dora de Romero, Dolores Rodríguez, among others. The main classes that were taught in this college were concentrated on the subjects of pedagogical anthropology, Spanish, French, arithmetic, bookkeeping, algebra, natural history, music, drawing, art, fashion design, and personal hygiene. Professor Rodriguez Verdin was the last director of the college, closing its doors in March 3rd of 1916, and this was due to the entry of revolutionary Carrancistas troops to the city of Oaxaca under the Mexican Revolution. So all this historical research allowed me to make and create a new vision of our history, really questioning the current Oaxacan artist scene in a search for the dignification of Oaxacan women and to make visible those voices that have been forgotten in our history, despite the fact that they were fundamental references for the construction of the Mexican state that aspired to be democratic and justiciable. But we know that deep down, that system resisted to recognize women as thinking beings, enclosing them only under the stereotype of being good wives, mothers, obedient homemakers that were there to utilize their femininity to serve them. So during this process, I continually wonder how to make these forgotten voices more visible. History has shown us that many of these women, amazing women and teachers who taught the art of drawing and manual art, how do we bring them to the present? So here I have planted my question to the museum that resides in these walls, the voices of those forgotten women. And why is that the Museum of Oaxacan Painters, doesn't have a room dedicated to those women or to those master artists? Would it be possible to rethink the Museum of Oaxacan Painters as a museum of Oaxacan female painters? Once again, I consider extremely important that we question our history, because through that we recover our past. And recovering the past is what has given us the strength to transform the present into the formation of our collective. Since 2020, we have been holding virtual conversations, video talks, in the engraving workshops of women artists, performances, and collective exhibits in commemoration of International Women's Day and in the fight of the elimination of violence against women, which is celebrated normally on November 25th. All of that has been part of a process of dignification of the artistic legacy of the masters in Mexican engraving. And it is thanks to the dialogue and collaboration between our female engravers that in May of 2021, we have managed to establish the basis to integrate our new collective, here called REGMO, which stands for Graphic Network of Oaxaca Women. And it is a form of a group of women who reside in the state of Oaxaca who carry out artistic and cultural activities focused on strengthening, making visible, disseminate, and promote the production of the group of women artists. And we do all of this in a collaborative and supportive way to generate spaces for reflections, to reflect precisely on art, in our gender, and what is to be a feminist. I think our group is an example of collaboration and dialogue to create new venues that make us more conscious about how history resonates to all of us and to acknowledge women and men equally, that they both have equally contribute to the artistic development of the art in Oaxaca and the world. The image that you see on the screen is a piece of mine that I named La Salida es Adentro, which in English will be something like to let go comes from in within. This piece to me represents a transformation of our mindset. Even if it means breaking our systemic world, it means freedom. And with that, I have been able to explore engraving to express my identity and my freedom and my ability to transform myself and the community that I live with. I am very thankful for the artistic influence that I have had in my life through my professors and different teachers. And with that, I would like to end saying that I like to see myself as an entity of metamorphosis, such as the image that you see on the screen. This is also of my creation. And in this image, what I try to seek is my past, to understand the present. There is no absolute truth. I believe that our women movement represents part of our embracing ourselves and with a sense of belonging. And we look and we seek our emancipation and the return to our original strength. And this is how, and this is why I call myself an engraver, a graphic artist who flies in a spiral. Thank you all again. Thank you so much, Ali. Very inspiring, very, very inspiring. It's a completely different perspective, and I love to see that not too far from us, we are fighting for the same. And with that, I would like to open the audience for questions. Feel free to type your question and we will read them now.
Fanny, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I wonder if I could please pose one to Ali Pai and Antonio. I wonder if you could each speak to what you're personally working on right now. If you could share just a little bit about your own process right now, or the kinds of things you're thinking about in your work right now, any projects you're involved in.
I could go first if I'm actually very happy to say that I was able to finish a 3x2 linoleum print that I'm actually showing at the National Museum of Mexican Art, where I did a homage to all the medical workers, the people that are the frontline workers are putting their lives on the line, specifically during these times. And kind of had to play a little bit with some of the sayings that we have here in Espanol, because sometimes we usually go like and say, gracias a Dios, I made it, or thank God. And we always like, thank God. And I've had a conversation with my family. I'm like, well, what about the doctor? You want to thank them too? And so kind of playing on that, I made a print called Divinum Scientium. I think in Latin it says divine science, so Ciencia Divina. And I just wanted to kind of create a print of that. And I usually try to speak about what is it that's happening and affected me, usually my community or my surroundings. So I try to make work that usually speaks to that. I'm happy to say that I'm also putting together a project that I'm gonna be working with my high school students. So shout out to all my students from Kelly High School that I teach here in Chicago. And that's what I do. I usually try to make sure that I'm keeping those things very important and dear to my heart that I speak of and making sure that I'm talking and making sure that I'm evoking those people and letting them know that they're not forgotten, whether it's the doctor, the nurse, or the janitor down the hallway. That it makes it available for me to continue to work in the high school as well.
Gracias, Antonio. Ali, la pregunta es si pudieras darnos un resumen de lo que estás trabajando ahora actualmente, alguna pieza artística que estés realizando.
Sí, claro. Sí.
Yes, I can show you now. Look at that. Ali has her own studio right there.
Sí, precisamente aquí en el
¿Puedes
taller
levantarla un poquito más? Levantarla un poco más. Ok.
Esta es una prueba de color. Es una prueba de color de una edición que estoy ahorita sacando y que se llama Sálvate.
Antonio, do you want to translate that prueba de color? I'm not sure how to say that in the artistic language.
Correct. No, what Ale Pai is doing here is a color proof of what is it that she's going to be submitting. And ¿cuál es el título otra vez, Ale?
El título, bueno, esta ya sería la bona tiré definitiva, que estoy ahorita ya, entonces se llama Sálvate.
Save Yourself, I believe is the name of the print. And this is, I believe in English, the correct term is bona tire, which means it's a good proof that's ready to pull. So the color proof that she does after she signs off on it and it's good to go, then they're able to do the impressions of the actual like suite of the work that she's putting together. And that's an actual, the good print that's ready to go, that it's going to be printed now.
Así como el maestro Alfaro Siqueiros hizo al hombre en llamas, también creo que existe en la mujer de en llamas, ¿no? La mujer de fuego, pero que trata de salvar todo eso que se está haciendo cenizas. Entonces, es una forma de volver a abrazarte y de al mismo tiempo retomar símbolos muy mexicanos que en mi caso los hago desde una postura muy feminista y de género.
So she's recalling one of the prints from the old masters, which he created a print which is Man on Fire, I think, Orozco. So what she's doing is she's kind of playing off that and then bringing it with a more feminist view, and she's obviously depicting a woman and kind of bringing in a lot of that imagery that connects with a lot of Mexican culture and things of that nature. And all these things are coming from the ashes, which is what she's trying to salvage in this in the print that she's creating.
Thank
Los
you.
materiales, perdón. Pues los materiales son tener una prensa, ¿no? Que le llamamos usualmente el tórculo, y trabajamos en diferentes materias que son MDF o puede ser también linóleo, y bueno, de la madera que es por excelencia el mejor, que sería la madera de cedro, que es la más, suavecita y que podemos encontrar aquí en Oaxaca.
So the materials that she uses, it could be either linoleum or MDF board, which is like something that derives from wood. She uses her printing press that's in the back, and I believe she also said that when she does wood cuts, she uses a soft type of wood, which is called cedro, and I'm trying to remember right now, recall it out of my head. What's it called in English? I apologize.
Cedar.
But, thank you. There you go. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, cedar, which is what we use as well because it's a soft wood and it's easy to cut, but it also maintains itself. So when it goes through the pressure of the press, it does not lose its, it doesn't lose anything. So it doesn't shift on you or anything of that nature.
Only the last, finally, I invite you to come Oaxaca. The doors is open, and only I want to see you my beautiful taller or workshop of engraving.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're gonna show us your workshop. Yes, that's great. Thank you, Ali. This is great. This is a dream to come. And with that, there is Marta Black is saying, wow, there's so many questions. I agree. And she's asking, how can they follow your work? Susan, Antonio, and Fanny, and Ali, if you are in Instagram or on Facebook, or if you can type in the chat, maybe your website. And again, they're asking, when are you coming to Utah? I'm working on that. We had that conversation, and it will be a dream come true if Antonio and Ali could come and perhaps do Grabadolandia here in Salt Lake City. That will be amazing. This is another question. When is the festival in Chicago? And this is coming in November, right, Antonio?
Yes, the festival is we usually put it on our social media account. So what we're doing is we're doing some pre-recorded videos from various artists. And I should probably invite, right now that I have Ale Pai here, so she can't say no to me. Maybe she'll participate in the virtual printmaking festival. It happens November 19, 20, and the 21st. So we're gonna have live conversations happening via Instagram and Instagram TV. We'll have conversations where the artists will do a demonstration live. They'll talk about their work and just pretty much, it's all gonna be nerd talk for us printmakers, and just talking about what kind of materials we use, alternatives, and things of that nature, where we usually talk about either an artist, or what's the IG is Instituto _Gráfico _Chicago. That's our Instagram account. And we're just going to talk shop and discuss various methods of printmaking, and also demonstrate methods that people could do at home with their family members, their kids specifically, because we want to make sure that we're helping our families get through this pandemic in a very nice printmaking artistic manner as possible. So we'll probably be doing some aluminum printmaking there as well.
I want to say that I have mentioned to Antonio that Artes de México in Utah will be sharing their material online. So stay tuned in our pages for Facebook and Instagram, and maybe getting the links to some of the workshops through our newsletter, so you can join that. That will be great. There is a question here quickly. It says, Gerardo Mosquera talks about the Brazilian modernist anthropophagy metaphor of his essay against Latin American art. This metaphor has been fascinating to me in understanding the digestion of colonialism through art. How do you think this concept does or does not apply in the Mexican printmaking culture? Anybody would like to answer that question? Holly Rios is saying, sorry if that was too specific.
That's a great question, and I'm trying to like I guess digest it as best as I can. But from what I understand and personal experiences, when it comes to artwork, and when it looks at as a colonial standpoint, I know that being a young individual growing up in Mexico City, going to the museums, at first I was not seeing myself on the walls, because when you go to museums, sometimes you see whoever's sponsoring the art at that time and whoever's able to put it together, right? But I think the demystification or the breaking of that type of work has to do to the mural movement, where Diego Rivera, Siqueiros, Orozco, and other muralists took it upon themselves to break away from that type of like mentality and celebrate culture de Mexico, celebrate the history, celebrate the people, and putting them in public spaces by allowing people to be able to read these murals and kind of celebrate themselves as they look upon themselves. Kind of what goes on with one of the problems that we were having here in Chicago when it comes to the printmaking, I guess, things that were happening here in the city, that we were not seeing representation or invitations happening. So thus, we had to create our own outlets and opportunities to be able to break upon that. Because when you go to the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a great museum, it's very hard to see yourself if you're a person of color sometimes on those walls. The importance of having the National Museum of Mexican Art being established, where young kids could go to themselves and they see themselves on the wall and understand that everybody is worthy of being an art subject or being celebrated in artwork. And I hope I kind of understood the question in that manner. So that's what I was kind of taking it in that manner.
Holy Rios is saying, they're very phrasing, what role does colonialism play in the history of Mexican printmaking? And I agree with you. I think it's that's precisely the main purpose of these conversations as we created Artes de México in Utah, is to precisely to talk about where do we see ourselves, or don't we see ourselves in art? And so this is a great example.
I'll add just with that kind of a better understanding of the question. Pablo O'Higgins, his family was steeped in manifest destiny. They were trained in manifest destiny when they came out west, in mining, in opening sea to shining sea glory of the U.S. Pablo goes to Mexico. He's a U.S. citizen, and he has to be super critical of the U.S.'s role in Mexico. He is turning his back on everything he learned from his father. His father, a judge, decided a case about which individual or company owns the mining rights in Utah. Pablo is celebrating the people owning the mineral rights. So he was in a very, very difficult position, and he took it on. I mean, he really stuck his neck out for the Mexican workers, and he had to turn his back on everything that his father's family grew up and trained and came west for. So that, I think he was very bold for his time, even though he kept on that U.S. passport, which enabled him to really be an educator, but it also caused him a lot of criticism.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, there is another question here that says, what tips would you give to start a printmaking collective in Salt Lake City?
Ganas, just the ganas to carve, the ganas to roll and connect with other artists.
Teacher like you.
Yeah, and connect with artists, connect with printmakers that I know that when we get emails or requests to participate and work with others, we're lucky to have 9 members in our collective. So we usually put it out there. Whoever has the time, we'll take it upon ourselves and try to help. There's sometimes that we can't do anything about it, but for the most part, we're happy to answer questions, give tips, and even participate in projects that if we have the time and we're definitely interested when it comes to printmaking, we'll help as much as we can. Definitely. So
let's stay tuned with the online contribution in November.
I want to say about that question. De colonialism, bueno, en español. Evidentemente que aún tenemos y estamos arrastrando con estos rezagos y los lastres de 300 años, más de 300 años de colonialismo. De hecho, no llevamos ni casi, bueno, apenas, ¿no? Ni 2 siglos de alguna manera como independientes políticamente. Entonces, nuestra mentalidad mexicana sigue arrastrando muchas discriminaciones, segregaciones culturales, racismos fuertes, incluso entre nosotros mismos, que ha sido esta aculturización de nuestra formación actual de identidad. Realmente, por eso el grabado es una forma de emancipación de esa mentalidad que aún seguimos arrastrando.
I would quickly translate to that based on the previous question. Ali thinks that we still carry the pain of colonialism. It's been 300 years, 400 years, and we still think in many ways that like that, because the segregation, the racism that we create among each other, and that's why the art of engraving is a form of emancipation. There is another question here, quickly, I'm sorry. I really love your images and artwork. As an artist and activist, how do you celebrate successes and recharge when times are challenging? Ali, ¿cómo celebras tus éxitos y cómo cargas energías en tiempos tan desafiantes? Esa es la pregunta. Tu micrófono.
Sorry. Uniendo fuerzas. El grabado, de hecho, no se hace de manera individual. Alguien tiene que ayudarte a mojar el papel, otro tiene que ayudarte a preparar lo que es la placa, a lo mejor hasta tú en tintas, el otro te ayuda en mover. Es un trabajo colectivo que el grabado te inspira y que a partir de eso, de ese trabajo en colectivo, pues puedes hacer una sinergia con los demás. Yo creo que ahí está la respuesta siempre en el diálogo, tratar de comprender al otro y pues dar lo mejor de ti mismo, como por ejemplo lo que hace Antonio en el Instituto de Chicago, de hacer ferias, ¿no? De hacer, unir a los colectivos. Eso es lo que nos hace fuertes en el grabado. Y como también pues nosotros también hacemos expos muy pequeñas, pero con nuestro toque también.
So what Ali is saying is the way we go through challenges is uniting forces. Think about the art of engraving as something that where everybody collaborates. Someone has to wet the paper, someone has to prepare the tint. We all inspire each other into what we're doing. So this is exactly the sense of community and collectiveness. We also create a lot of dialogue of what we are creating and how we understand what we are creating. And also we organize as a community. This is our major strength. And then the last question that I have here is that I have someone, Ali, who is going to Oaxaca. They would love to connect with you and see if you have a studio that they can visit or how they can purchase some of your art. Lo voy a decir, Ali, tenemos a Christine Moore que está diciendo que va a ir a Oaxaca en el mes de enero. Ella le gustaría saber si se puede visitar tu estudio y se puede saber dónde y si algunos de tus obras están para la venta. Y si quieres ponerlo en el chat, dónde te pueden localizar o danos los datos a nosotros y le damos los datos a esta persona.
Welcome, friend, welcome. Come here with mezcal, tlayudas. Don't worry, you stay in my house.
See, I love this. Okay, I'll go too. Okay,
the same Antonio, Ashley, Susan, Fanny, it's the same message for you.
Gracias, gracias, Alejandra.
Thank you. Well, with that, I have all the questions. Let me just check one more thing. I believe those were all the questions and comments. So with that, Ashley, would you like to close?
Sure, thank you so much. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, Susan, Antonio, Ali, for being here. It's really an honor to have spent this time with you tonight. So thank you for sharing with us. I would also like to thank Maggie Treeley with UMFA, who is behind the scenes and has helped coordinate and organize this evening. Also, she has, for the educators that are joining us tonight, posted some information in the chat. So please be sure you check that before we go. And last but not least, I would love to thank Fanny Blauer and our partners at Artes de México in Utah. Fanny, we're so happy and honored to get to work with you on the series of classes. And to everyone who tuned in tonight, thank you so much for being here with us. Please visit the UMFA's website and Arte's website as well to see what we'll be up to next. And we hope we see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, all. And thank you for a true collaborative effort. This is a great example of uniting community, as Ali said. We all create that dialogue and create this beautiful evening. Thank you.